happened to predictability? From the governor, health experts, evening TV. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, there's uncertainty on how to resume sports safely in the fight over the election info we read and see. But there's a heart in this week's Word of Thanks campaign, a hand to hold on to in the firefighter taking us behind the fire lines. And for the first time in months, the whole Next crew is back together in one show. It's a full house. Everywhere you look. Next. It's tougher to be an informed voter in Colorado than in other places. What with all of our ballot issues and propositions you have to sift through? The Blue Book Voter Guide is 120 pages this year. If you're thinking that nobody reads that thing, I think they do, because there's a lawsuit over what is in it about an amendment to change our taxes. Well, I have your attention now. Here's Steve Steger.
Oh, still on mute.
Gosh, I love Zoom press conferences.
It's up at the top. Sometimes, if are you on an iPad?
They could be awfully complex.
Is there a teenager in the house?
Speaking of complexity, have you heard about Amendment B? Voters will get to choose whether or not to repeal the Gallagher Amendment. That's a subject I'll let Marshall explain in greater length someday. But the simplest way to describe it, the Gallagher Amendment requires 55% of state property taxes to be collected from non-residential property owners. Homeowners pay the other 45%. As home values have increased across the state, residential tax assessment rates have stayed low to keep that ratio in the same place. There's a much more detailed description about that in the Blue Book you're about to get, and that is where this story comes in.
In 3 minutes, they totally changed the language of Amendment B in the Blue Book.
Protect Our Homes Colorado, the group against Amendment B, is suing the state legislature, claiming lawmakers injected a campaign ad for Amendment B into the Blue Book at the last minute. The Blue Book, which is supposed to be
A fair and impartial explanation, plus pros and cons provided by interested citizens.
Each election cycle, the Nonpartisan Legislative Research Council spends months researching all arguments about everything that appears on your ballot. They interview people with interests on both sides. They write drafts, get feedback from both sides, write more drafts. Then before they publish the book, they present it to a committee of lawmakers who have the final say. Usually their changes are small, but this year they changed a lot, starting with the top.
They changed the title
From Modify Property Taxes to Repeal Gallagher Amendment. Those opposed to repealing Gallagher say the new language creates the impression that taxes won't increase when they likely will.
They made wholesale changes that basically turned the Blue Book language on Amendment B into campaign propaganda for the yes vote.
So the Blue Book heads to the printer tomorrow to be mailed to voters by October 2nd. That is the constitutional latest date that this can be mailed out. The group is trying to ask a judge for a temporary restraining order to stop the printing and get a judge's ruling on whether or not what the legislature did here was in line with the Constitution, and they expect that a judge will rule on that rather quickly, Kyle.
Literally stop the presses. What would it take to change the language?
So in this case, what it took for the legislature to change the language was a 2/3 majority. So it took an awful lot of that committee to vote for these changes. That's been the argument of the other side of lawmakers who say that these are acceptable. As far as what it would take to stop the presses, it would take a judge's order in Denver District Court, which is where this lawsuit has been filed.
Steve Steger, wearing the official uniform of Men Across Colorado. Steve, thank you. We just learned that there was an altercation late this afternoon in which police shot somebody in Denver. This happened near 10th and Inca. There's an area near West Early College taped off right now, Sky 9 overhead. Person shot was taken to the hospital. No officers were injured in this. This just happened, so we're still working to learn what led up to the altercation and the shooting. We'll keep you updated. Hopes of high school football in Colorado this fall were raised by the governor yesterday and then dashed by CHSAA today. Makes the Colorado High School Activities Association look like the bad guys to all the kids and parents who wanted to play football. But I don't get why Polis is putting the idea out there other than in an attempt to score some points of his own. We know that the pandemic has forced politicians to walk this tightrope in the swirling winds of public opinion. Governor Polis and all political leaders have been at their best through this when they let the science and the public health experts guide the decision-making in the discussion. As much as the governor's critics want to blame him, when the science calls for restrictions, then the governor is on solid ground to say, let's follow the science and the public health experts. And when they determine, for instance, that there's a way to safely have small pods of fans back at Broncos games, well, then that too is leading by the science. The understandable temptation for any politician is to put on the Broncos mask and put on the orange tie and come out front to take credit for that good news. But if science is leading our decision-making and not the granting of political favors by the governor, well, then you can't have science make the unpopular decisions and have the governor make the popular ones. CHSAA unanimously decided to stick with its plan to play football in the spring. Any points that the governor scored by floating that idea yesterday should be taken off the board. Political ads have been airing so long they're running out of new content. Their claims are being rehashed. Delicious hash. Speaking of, politics guy Marshall Zellinger has another one of those tasty truth tests.
Peanut butter and jelly, two things that go together.
Since this is a truth test, full disclosure, I hate peanut butter.
And I love it, but that's not necessary to disclose in a truth test.
Hey, hashtag transparency. Back to the ad.
Gardner and Trump gave trillions in tax breaks to corporations and the wealthy.
This only gives you half the information. In 2017, Gardner supported, Congress passed, and the president signed H.R. 1, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It changed the tax code and lowered taxes for mostly everyone, not just corporations and the wealthy. The law lowered tax brackets, increased the standard deduction, increased child tax credits, and reduced the corporate income tax rate. Analysis by the Tax Policy Center found that people earning less than $25,000 would see an average tax cut of $60. People who made between $49,000 and $86,000 would see a $900 cut, and people earning between $308,000 and $733,000 would see a $13,000 tax cut. People making more saved even more, $51,000 on average. Yes, it provided high-dollar tax benefits for corporations and the wealthy, but you likely also benefited from it too.
Gardner stood with Trump and voted 9 times to eliminate health care protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
Yes, Gardner has a history of trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act or limit its funding, and he was on record doing it as a congressman before Colorado voters elected him to be senator instead of Democrat Mark Udall. Stood with Trump 9 times? That's rhetoric. 5 of the votes that the ad cites happened before Trump was sworn in as president.
Like macaroni and cheese, Gardner stuck with Trump 98% of the time.
No, not that high. Senate Majority used this statistic in a June political ad, and during that truth test, we said it was close. 538.com analyzes a senator's vote compared to Trump's position on that topic. Gardner and Trump match 89% of the time. With this truth test, I'm Marshall Zellinger.
So I went through a stack of your suggestions of what we could do with this week's Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign. You know, $5 at a time, we blew past the $500,000 mark in like 3 months. A few of you this week suggested tackling student lunch debt. Grades aren't the only thing that follow kids through school. Lunch debt gets paid off one of 2 ways usually. Either families that are often struggling to get by, either they come up with the money for the student's lunch debt, or the district has to cover it and take money out of other programs. So let me tell you about a district and its nonprofit foundation that I think are doing this the right way and how we might be able to help them. When I think of District 6 in Greeley-Evans and its Food for Success program, the word of thanks that comes to mind is fuel. The Greeley-Evans School District and its nonprofit foundation know that food fuels learning. Kids have to learn, so they're not shamed if they can't pay for their lunch. They get the same meal. Nobody in the room knows any different. And the district has also stopped trying to collect student lunch debts from families due to the economy and the pandemic. But that means that there is $147,000 owed to that particular district for student lunches, and it's money that's going to come out of the district's general fund if they can't find it from anywhere else. The Greeley-Evans School District's nonprofit foundation has worked for a couple of years now to try and find people in their community who are willing to pick up the cost of a few kids' lunches so that those families can focus on paying their bills and so that high-needs school district doesn't have to cut elsewhere to cover the cost of the meals. I'm guessing that we together could cover a couple classrooms worth of school meals, maybe some entire grades. If you're in for $5, as always, I will match the first $55 donation so that we can give those families peace of mind. The student lunch debt is not going to follow their kid through school, and give the Greeley-Evans School District the ability to preserve their other programs. Text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 or check any of our social media pages. There you'll find the link to donate. We're not going to be able to solve the student lunch debt crisis across Colorado, but Greeley-Evans is one of the largest districts in the state, and they've got a lot of families there struggling to get by, and we can make all the difference for them. He left his family to go protect the lives and property of Coloradans he's never met.
Most people live here because they love being outdoors, and we really don't want to burn it all down so we don't get to enjoy it.
In return for his work, he'd just like a quick word. Next. Firefighter recently told us if you want to keep enjoying Colorado, you have to respect it. He's back from the fire lines after 2 weeks away from his young family, and he spoke with our Anusha Roy.
It is a big shock to the system, for sure.
The dramatic swing in weather has South Metro firefighter Dustin Searle reflecting.
From upper 90s and being out on an extremely hot fire to being in snow.
He's thinking about the 14 days last month he spent on the front lines of the Pine Gulch fire. From the day he said goodbye to his family.
My kiddos are just telling me, be safe, we love you.
To the drive towards a fire, burning its way into history.
And we were hearing words like extreme fire behavior, burning 24 hours a day, never slowing down.
Pine Gulch lived up to those words.
But what I saw numerous times was a fire coming downhill against the wind, making a aggressive push, moving faster than truly you could walk or almost at a jogging pace.
In his 18 years as a firefighter, this fire behaved in a way Searle's never seen. It burned in such remote areas he would go days without speaking to his family.
We view them as a luxury if we get to get on our cell phone and make a call.
And it wasn't a dramatic weather change like this week, but a more subtle change with a drop in temperature and more humidity that marked a turning point for firefighters.
I happened to get to pick up my son from his first day at kindergarten. He did in-person school and I got to pick him up, and so that was really neat for me.
When looking back at his time spent on the front lines, Searle doesn't see sacrifice, he sees duty.
Almost a little bit of a sense of pride of being able to be part of solving a problem. There is also a little bit of some sorrow of realizing that the state that we love had some severe devastation.
So Searle said Pine Gulch was so remote that they didn't always have their traditional fire camps with showers and outhouses. So they essentially were working 16-hour days and then camping at night. And because of the work that he does, he loves the work. He knew that this was something that just needed to be done. He had absolutely no complaints about that kind of working condition. And Pine Gulch is 95% contained. We know it's just one of many in the state. And Searle is just hoping that after hearing a little bit more about what they see and deal with on the front lines, Kyle, that it will remind people to just pay attention to the fire bans and do their part in all of this.
They deal with the consequences of our actions, big and small. Thank you, Nusha.
Mm-hmm.
If you've had it with our taste of winter and summer, this storm is out of here. Sorta. It's moving out slowly. We did manage 41 degrees today, but it certainly feels colder out there and another cold night coming up. This whole system is kind of rotating north and northeast over Colorado. It'll bring in additional snow to the southern mountains where winter weather and travel advisories are posted. For Denver, a slight chance of a snow shower overnight tonight and again tomorrow, and the whole thing moves north of us by Friday. But the real weather headline is the kickoff of a warming and drying trend that starts tomorrow. Cloudy and 33 tonight, so just above freezing. Partly sunny, 55 tomorrow. 70s for Friday and 80s for the weekend. A beautiful warm weather trend that'll get us into the middle part of next week.
Hikers and bikers gotta keep them separated, at least in one of our most popular parks.
We did this for everyone. This was not meant to be for one visitor group.
A possible peace treaty. Next. We're putting some wear on our outdoor spaces during the pandemic. Apex Park in Golden, one of the metro area's most popular spots. So much so, as of tomorrow, Jeffco Open Space is going to separate hikers and bikers on some of the trails. Bikes only on the even days, no bikes on the odd days.
Hi there, how are you guys doing?
Getting ready for tomorrow?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you know about the trail changes.
We are at Apex Park and we are at the East Trailhead. So starting September 10th, which is tomorrow, we will be changing the trail management at Apex Park. So on even dates, the portion of the park will be bike only, and on odd dates, the portion of the park will be hiker or trail runner or equestrian only.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be great for everyone.
Makes a lot of sense, a lot safer for everybody around.
We collected 10 stakeholder representatives. So these people said, hey, I want to represent trail runners, or I want to represent hikers, or I want to represent visitors that used to come to Apex but don't anymore because they don't like it here anymore. How do we meet the needs of all of these different visitor groups at Apex? So as you enter the designated use area, you're going to encounter a barrier and you're going to have to open it. And on the barrier, we have put a giant stop sign that says you need to know the calendar date to safely use this park.
Should be good.
We hope that people will just, as they see the gate, understand that there's another part of the park they can still visit and that this area needs to be avoided on particular days. But the people that are visiting hopefully will have a safer, better experience. And that's really our goal.
They may make some adjustments come winter. One of Colorado's largest school districts is not hounding families for student lunch debt during the pandemic. I think that's classy, so let's help those families out. That and your feedback next. Have your $5 ready so we can do some good together this week? We're going to wipe out a bunch of the family's student lunch debt in the Greeley-Evans School District. That way it's not following struggling families and their students from year to year. And the district won't have to dip into funding for other programs to cover the cost of those meals if the families can't pay. Text THANKS to 303-871-1491. We'll send you the link to join me in donating. We're working through the district's nonprofit foundation. They've been chipping away at this mountain of debt for 2 years, but I bet we'll be able to tell a lot of those families, don't worry about it. Your kid's lunch is on us. Feedback tonight. Rachel says, I am crying laughing at the next opening video. Blue says, did a legit spit take at the next opening, choke laughing at you arranging your firewood. I wasn't arranging the firewood, I was dusting it. You got to make sure you dust it. I'll see you next time.